from Councillor Wilson and Councillor Ward, and Councillor Rawson and Councillor Adams are substitutes. Nice to see you both. And we have apologies from Councillor Brazier from New Sherwood. Are there any other apologies that I've not mentioned? Yeah.
Speaker there. Sorry, guys. We've got Councillor Barry Answer is on the way, so he's not. Apologies, but he's on the way.
Yeah. Good. Right. So, having dealt with the apologies, I need to ask you whether you've got any declarations of interest and items on the agenda. Are there any to raise? No. Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Do I have a mover that they're a correct record? Yeah, Councillor Carr. Somebody else want to say? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Walker-Gurney. So they've been moved and seconded. Are all those, everybody in agreement? Great, thank you. Last time we met, so we had a question from a member of the public. We don't have any this time. So we can now move on to item 6, which is the East Midlands retrofit strategy. And we have Jacob Vivian. I bet you get called Vivian sometimes. Yes. Who's programme lead for green growth with MCA, and he's going to present a report to us, which we then need to consider whether we're going to recommend as a committee that the MCA board adopt the East Midlands retrofit strategy and assume it's the leadership for its delivery. And so I'll hand over to you, Jacob, so that you can inform us of what we will be letting ourselves in for and the great work that's been done so far.
Thanks very much. So yeah, as just been stated, my name is Jacob Vivian. I'm the head of green growth at MCA, and I'm deputising today for Michael Gallagher, Director for Climate Resilience and Green Growth, who couldn't unfortunately be here today. So the East Midlands retrofit strategy. So the background to this is essentially about a year and a half ago, in May 2024, all the constituent and non-constituent authorities, local authorities in what is now MCA, got together to put in a bid for a local area retrofit accelerator pilot. And this was a pilot led by the MCS Foundation, aiming to craft a regionally bespoke strategy for retrofit in order to address unique challenges and opportunities in several regions around England, in order to attract further funding and investment to deliver retrofit effectively at scale. Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire were successful in that proposal and were one of 4 areas that proceeded. And in the intervening period, 58 different organisations across the MCA region have co-designed to deliver the retrofit strategy, including all the non-constituent and constituent local authorities. To be clear, what the retrofit strategy is and what it isn't. What it is, it's a place-based framework setting out how we as a region can deliver retrofit in the most effective way at scale. In a sense, it's answering the how question as a strategy. What it isn't is a capital programme for delivery, or indeed a technical specification around what technologies are best in order to retrofit. It's very much focused on how we as a place can coordinate and work together as local authorities and other partners to deliver retrofit in the best way for our people. And indeed, it sets out a very strong people-centred approach to delivering retrofit. So this strategy was finalised roughly around the summer of last year by all the partners co-designing it, and in October a launch event was held by the local authorities to launch the strategy. This was done to coincide with the successful delivery of EMCA's first capital programme for retrofit, which was the 10 million East Midlands devolution retrofit programme. And Mayor Clare and others did attend from EMCA at this launch event, but at this stage, EMCA hasn't actually officially endorsed the strategy that's been co-designed by all those partners, including our local authorities. So essentially, the purpose of this report is to enable that official endorsement to happen. And this endorsement matters for several reasons. First of all, it enables EMCA, well, first of all, we've been asked by the local authorities to take leadership of this strategy. It was very much designed. The reason why it covered Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire was because it was done very much with the creation of EMCA in mind back in the summer of 2024. And there is a lot of desire and momentum for EMCA to take over the coordination of delivering the strategy with our local authority and other partners. There are also other advantages to EMCA endorsing the report. So first, primarily around access to funding. So the MCS Foundation, who have set out this local area retrofit accelerator programme, which this is a part of, are making available 500k of revenue funding, which is non-competitive. So essentially, as long as you can show you have items for the revenue to be spent on, you will be able to access up to 500k of that ring-fenced funding in order to enable delivery of the strategy that they've already been working to create. With this 500k funding, we've already outlined, and it's in the report, that we would like to create a specific post around a retrofit support officer to help us turn the how, which the strategy outlines, into actual programmes of delivery, which seek to access capital funding, etc. There are other advantages as well to EMCA endorsing it. So as part of our local growth plan, we've laid out our ambition to deliver 12,000, retrofit 12,000 homes by 2035 in order to lower energy bills. And it's also laid out as an important part of our inclusive growth framework for supporting communities across the region, where we have a fuel poverty rate of roughly 11%. It also ties in with our soon-to-be published corporate plan as well. And many of you will no doubt have seen that the government recently published the Warm Homes Plan, which has outlined that there will be £15 billion of funding made available for retrofit across the country. With this strategy endorsed and led by EMCA, we place ourselves in very strong position to access the capital funding that is likely to be emanating from that Warm Homes Plan. In terms of immediate next steps, then, we have an interim steering group composed of various stakeholders, including local authorities, who pull together the strategy. And with this endorsement, that steering group will become official and take responsibility for coordinating, with EMCA chairing the steering group. So I think that covers the main points. So I guess over to questions.
Any questions, comments?
Yes, I'm very happy to endorse the paper and the agreement today as this being the right way forward. We know it's the right thing to do because where we've seen retrofit schemes go in, it has massively reduced people's household bills and improved their health as well, because they're not living in cold homes anymore. But there's no doubt that it's a complex area to actually work in, and some of the early schemes, you know, the companies actually providing that have struggled in as far as keeping their viability as a company going with a more limited supply chain. So it seems to make very good sense to actually have this funding agreed, have the officer to actually help link people up with the companies. It's more of a facilitator role, really, isn't it? So you know what's out there, but also enhancing the supply chain as well. So we're very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what's been said, but as you will probably know, retrofitting is probably the biggest contribution that housing can make towards our climate change objectives. And whilst there are still, lots of things that possibly it doesn't cover, it is, I believe, in general, a good thing for us to be, working with, if you like. And in that sense, I think I would be minded to support it because it does help with various objectives that each authority has.
Thank you. Councillor Walker-Gurney.
Thank you again. Very supportive in general. I think everyone wants lower bills. It's all really good. Couple of little questions, not massive concerns, but just to make sure that we are doing everything we need to. Do we have the team in place currently? I know you said we're recruiting for a couple of positions, but do we have, or are we, happy with the team that we have in place? Or are we sort of relying more on partners to do a lot of the heavy lifting?
Is there anybody else that wants to say anything before I go back to Martin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a question really about liability, and on the occasions if something does go wrong in terms of the work that's done to somebody's property, if we thought through the liabilities and whether that may be coming back to us as EMCA, or the sort of robust lines of accountability for the contractors.
Yeah, we want good quality work, don't we? Jacob, would you like to? Most of those were comments, but there were two questions. I don't know whether, Edward, do you want to say something about this staff structure behind this?
Yeah, actually, if I begin, then you come in. So in terms of the question around the team, well, so this is something we are looking to develop. I think it should be made clear that this isn't something that EMCA will be seeking to deliver on its own. It's very much done in partnership with our local authorities and other stakeholders. So it will be using that existing resource that's available. So it's not all on EMCA to do everything. Obviously, we would be taking the leading coordinating role. In terms, though, of the EMCA team, I should note that I'm joined today by my colleague Adrian, who joined us recently from Nottinghamshire County Council, where he helped co-lead the creation of this strategy with colleagues from Bolsover District Council. So Adrian joining the team is very much our first step in making sure we have the capability and expertise in-house to deliver the strategy effectively. And as noted, one of the first things we aim to do with the revenue funding is that hiring that support officer and looking to expand from there.
I suppose it's just, I think what we're trying to create for this is you'll see it in your own authorities, I'm sure, where you, sorry, thank you. You get sort of that snowball effect, don't you, where we get this 500,000 allows us to have an officer, which means we'll be able to bid for other things, and then we'll get another, these things grow over time. So I think, have we got absolutely everything we need in place today? No. Are we satisfied that we've got enough to get that thing rolling down the hill and get started? Yes.
And what about Councillor Rawson's point about the people who have the retrofits done in their home? What assurance do they have that it's good quality? And also was talking about the liability to EMCA of, what would be our liability?
But I guess it's worth saying that part of the reason this strategy has been done, and part of the reason why the MCS Foundation were keen to commission pilots across the country is precisely to rectify that problem where retrofit has been done in the past, not always in the best way. And so this strategy really does emphasise an approach to retrofit that will enable that high quality outcome. Now, because it's more of a high level strategy at this stage, it's not an actual delivery programme. It doesn't go into the details of how a specific programme is going to look to cover those things. But the very much the spirit of the strategy of what it's trying to achieve is to put us in a position where, when we are putting those capital programmes in place, we have a framework to enable us to achieve those best outcomes.
Councillor Elsden, I notice you've got your microphone on. Are you
Sorry, I
Want to
thought I was just
speak?
queued up. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something. So the 500K, that's just the cost of running the programme. That's not the actual funding available for retrofitting. Is that correct?
So that is revenue funding, which we can access once MCA endorses the strategy. So it's essentially ring fenced by the MCS Foundation for MCA. We technically wouldn't have to access all that 500K, but it is all available. We just have to. Yeah, I mean, we will look to maximise it.
So
But
it's for running the programme. It's not.
yeah, it's
£12,000.
it's to enable a future capital programme.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker-Gurley.
Thank you. Are we doing anything right now regarding getting local colleges training people for the specific retrofit jobs?
So if I'm honest, I'm less familiar with, because a lot of that sits with our skills team, which isn't my area of remit. Don't know if
I think I can probably say something about that. Prior to MCA being formed, I was a member of the investment committee for the D2N2 LEP, and I'm also the skills lead for Chesterfield Borough Council. So from those two roles, I do know that the D2N2 LEP was involved in funding programmes that so that learning providers across the region could provide training in retrofit. And that doesn't just happen at colleges, it also happens within training companies that specialise in this. And we do have one of those based in Chesterfield as it happens. So there is training available, and businesses that would be looking for that can get advice on that from the business advisors that work for their local authority or the Chamber of Commerce. And obviously young people that are in schools who might be looking towards the training in green industries, that is covered by the D2N2 and Careers Hub, which has recently gone into MCA as well. So there is careers advice in schools about routes into this employment. However, one issue that the D2N2 Investment Board identified was that there was a lot of competition for these people who had got themselves trained in this industry. So it was the usual scenario where, you know, the big boys like the colleges, who are quite big corporations, would invest in the training for the tutors to be able to deliver this learning, and then the tutors would be poached by the private sector, and so then certainly the members that were involved then were very clear to sort of give a strong message out that we wouldn't want that happening. And I'm sure that that's something that the skills MCA Skills and Employment Board are aware of, but I will have a word with Councillor Heseldine next time I see him to check that it's on his radar. Anyone else? Councillor Adams.
Thank you. I think we all agree in principle that this programme's a good idea, but you said it's not to do with the technical specifications. When is that going to be decided? Who is going to be responsible for that? You know, it's really important if we're spending this money that it does work and the public gets value for money from the project.
So at this stage, it's really, this strategy is I guess one step further back from that, which is why as a strategy itself, it's essentially agnostic. Obviously, every house needs to have its own assessment about what are the best technologies to do this. I'm aware that partners such as Nottingham Energy Partnership and others spend a lot of work looking at what are the best solutions for the kind of fabric of housing and those specifics. So I can't really answer specifically that question at this stage because we're not there yet, but we do have a number of partners who are involved in this strategy who do have that expertise and who would be bringing it to the table for any capital programs that were created.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points actually from purely Derby's point of view. I just wondered why it's low on your priority of new build. And also, will you be adjusting the areas of investment because of LGR review, or you know, what you have presented is what it is, regardless of the boundary changes?
Not sure I understand. We say low on the area of priorities, low on the area of investment. Sorry, what? Repeat the question.
If you sort of go by the map that's been given, I mean, Derby seems to be very low in terms of your priority for new build.
That's the next item.
Oh, right.
Okie doke. So I think this is a really good piece of work. I think our colleagues who've been working on this for a few years now should be congratulated at getting it to this stage and it having such a wide level of support. I know that myself and the Chief Executive from my authority both wrote in a joint letter to saying we supported it, and I've seen the letters from the other organisations. They weren't just letters of saying yes, we're in for it when this got going. There were actually letters sort of really saying what they thought the issues were and what could be done. It was a really big there was a lot of hump behind it. So well done, Adrian, for work that you've done and your colleagues that worked with you at that time. The launch event, as was mentioned, was in October. It took place in Matlock. Mayor Clare was there, and Councillor Wood, who is a permanent member of this committee, and Councillor McEwen, who is the one of the Derbyshire district leaders on representatives on the MCA board, was also there. So and there were other councillors across. The reason I know the Derbyshire ones is that we had a Derbyshire meeting yesterday where I pointed out to them. But so it has really got a good level of support. And I think that MCA is the right home for it going forward to make sure that this really good work continues, but it's also integrated in the other work that's necessary. And in terms of we all know that the value of having a warm home that you can heat cheaply underpins how you feel about going about your daily lives and contributing to your communities and your workplaces. So it's spot on all the MCA priorities as well. So Edward, yeah.
If I may, so I just perhaps I'll leave it to you guys to perhaps to suggest when, but given the questions about liability, delivery models, assurances around how it's going to work, perhaps at the appropriate time, we'll bring a report back. It's great that we're signing off the strategy, but as I think the forward to the strategy says, it's the delivery that counts. So perhaps if you guys can bring back a report when we're at that stage so that we can answer some of the questions that were raised in more detail.
Yeah. And as we're as a committee, we're taking on responsibility for this. We are going to want a sort of a framework in which to do that, so that we can be clear when we're reporting back to the MCA board that we are delivering on it. So there's 6 recommendations on the bottom of the report. I'm not going to read them all out again to you. So I'd like to move them. Do I have a seconder? That's Councillor Woodings. All those in favour? Yeah, that's good support. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Jacob, for coming along to present the report, and we look forward to seeing more of you in the future.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm actually going to have to.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we've got the next item on the agenda is a presentation from Chris Jones, who's the Deputy Chief Executive of EMH, who are a registered provider in the East Midlands, not just the area covered by EMCA, but the wider East Midlands, as you'll have seen from some of the information that was circulated with the agenda. Obviously, Chris is going to tell us about the things that his organisation do, and but we've also asked him to sort of in his presentation sort of give you a flavour of what the role of registered providers is generally in the development sector as well, because obviously we can't have every registered provider at this meeting telling us about what they do. So it's broader education as well as finding out about the great things that you've done. Chris.
Is that better? Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. So I'm Chris Jones, Deputy CEO at EMH, so East Midlands Housing originally, and we're often referred to that. There's three things really I hope that comes across. The first thing, whilst I've got EMH slides and I represent EMH in the information, it's not unusual. A lot of the information that I'm sharing they're very, very similar across a number of housing associations. So I'll move away from EMH when I talk about it, but it gives it some context. But the three things I'd like really to stand out is that housing associations really make a difference. That's why we exist originally and what we do now. That housing associations are great partners to work with. Do some really great things when we work together with different organisations. I've got some examples of that in a moment. And finally, if it's important to our communities, then it's important to us. That's the essence of, and if you can remember that, I don't need to do any more slides. No, I'll go through the slides and I'll give you a bit more. So as I've said, EMH's mission and many housing associations' missions are providing housing in the main to improve opportunities for people. EMH has a care business and that works alongside within the group, and that gives us a real advantage to help our communities even more so. But that is our mission. And just a few bits of information about the group. 22,000 homes. In the East Midlands, you've got a real mix of housing associations, some that cover the country, that cover East Midlands. They have 80,000 homes, some of them that have 10,000 homes. So it's not an unusual number. It's a very strong number for the East Midlands. And I think we see ourselves as an East Midlands-based housing association with a national influence. Large turnover, we employ a lot of people, and the care business is going very, very strong. We build up to 500 new homes a year, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. That's the majority of my background from there, although I oversee housing as well now. And we've got a large loan portfolio, £600 million, which is going to grow if we're very successful in the next strategic partnerships, and I'll tell you more about that. But the last point is that place shaping ethos and community focus, and that's what we're all about, and that's what housing associations in the large are all about. So the kind of work we do, that some of these you might recognise, some of these you might not. Social rent, large part of what we provide in the communities is properties for social rent, which is significantly below private rent. It depends on where. We provide properties that include extra care housing, kind of retirement living properties that people get additional support if they need it. Not every housing association delivers that. There's not enough actually, but it really makes a difference to a community. I've seen some large communities being rebuilt, actually 15,000 new homes, and then there's a second thought, extra care or supported housing, and we believe quite strongly in that, and so we get involved in it. Affordable rent. Now, affordable rent is that gap between social rent and private rent, which may make sense to many of you. We don't do any more certain affordable rent. We went down the route of affordable rent because that was the only game in town if you wanted to build new homes. But everything that we build going forward is social rent and shared ownership. And shared ownership is a fantastic product that we build also that really unlocks a lot of opportunity for people. So much so that if people can't afford market sale, they can't afford private rent because the amount of cost associated with private rent and the challenges associated with having to move on sometimes from that. If they don't get shared ownership, they're going to end up on the waiting list. So it has a real place in the market, and it's something we do very well across all of the housing associations that I know. And there's some other things there, of course, our care and support services and tenancy support. Regeneration, there's more coming, but that's a reasonably new area because of the funding opportunity. I'll fly through this, but this, although it's our strategic priorities, it's coming to the end of the business plan. It represents a lot of what housing associations do. You've got to control your governance. Really, if you want to make a difference, you've got to build new homes. Repair service, customer voice has got to echo throughout the organisation. For housing associations, you've got to know your assets, and I think the sector has lost sight of that in the past and really catching up on it. There's hundreds of thousands of these properties across the UK, and with lots of mergers and local authorities passing their or us purchasing those properties, housing associations at one stage weren't really aware of their assets, what state they're in, but there's a big shift on that. And there's some other things there that obviously stand out. But I want to focus on the risks. Really, regulatory intensity is rising, and that's absolutely factual. So, we're quite rightly, we're very, very regulated. And we get a sort of assessment virtually every year, but a very deep assessment every few years. And that's intense. Are we charging the right rents at the right amounts? You can't slip outside of this. And quite rightly, it should be. Are we treating our customers with respect? Are their voices being heard? And the regulator will challenge us on those points, and we've got to evidence it. It's a risk that we welcome, but actually it means there's a lot of focus involved in that. Financial viability squeeze for housing associations. This is absolutely true in that there's quite a lot of investment. I'll give an example of this in our existing stock. So at one stage we'd spend, about 3 years ago, £21 million a year on our existing stock. And now we spend £50 million a year on that stock. Given that we bring in 154 million, we've then got to build 500 new homes a year, which is 65 million of our net costs. So there's a real push between the ability to build new homes, which we really want to do, and the need to spend money on our existing stock, because it's without question the most important thing is keeping our existing customers safe and making sure they've got a decent home to live in. So that's one of the big pushes that we have when we talk about our business plans. I know that every single housing association's having the same challenge. Cyber attacks make a massive difference. Cost of living I've mentioned there. And there's shifts within the government agendas around providing the right kind of service. I really welcome these shifts, but housing associations are making a big shift in their processes. You've got to respond to issues now and hazards within 24 hours. You should, you know, but housing associations weren't. So we're making a big difference in that area. The opportunity, just mindful of my time actually, the opportunity is that the government put out a number of things that are going to make a big difference. 10-year rent settlement. We know where we are with the rents, and we have done for some time. £39 billion worth of funding for the next 10 years. 2.5 in low interest loans, which I think will make a big difference. And of course, you've got things like warm home funding, and then opportunities with brownfield funding with the combined authority, what have you. These are real opportunities, and this is about our ability to unlock capacity to build more new homes, and that's really important to us. And so in the East Midlands, we're about to put in a bid for Strategic Partnerships 3. This is the new part of that £39 billion, which is for the next 10 years, although you kind of bid for 5 years and then bid again for an additional 5 years. So it's a real big opportunity for us, and we've got to put our best foot forward and prove that we can unlock schemes in the East Midlands to draw as much of that investment into the East Midlands as we possibly can. And we at AMH will, the maximum we could bid for is 350 million, and we're not far off that amount, working with other housing associations such as Futures. I'll move over that slide quickly because I know there's a question coming about it. But actually, I'll partly answer it. We've got less stock in these areas at the moment. We want to see those grow. So they're not a priority for new build, actually. It's moving on from this, and I'll show you that with a great scheme that we've got. The more we can build in the Derbyshire area and Nottinghamshire area, then the better. It makes a big difference. I've got some examples here, just to show you the kind of things that we get involved with as a housing association. And although we're obviously the best at building homes you can find, but we're not unusual. This is not an unusual kind of development. Standard Hill is 150 homes. There's 2 phases to it, and we build a real mix of properties there. How do we get to these properties? We spoke to the local authority and says, what do your communities need? One of the things they needed were supported housing. So there's a block of supported housing within this new development for people that really need it. Actually, we could have built a lot more, and we could have filled it, and we are doing that on other developments. So it's 150 new developments. There's a mix of affordable and shared ownership. This is the previous grant programme that's coming through. As I said, the new developments have no affordable homes. They are social rents. But this grant programme is our Strategic Partnership 1, which was largely affordable. Love a partnership, significant amount of grants, and we're on to that at the moment. The key challenges with this, and it's not unusual, is all of the kind of things you can imagine with a local area. But I want to draw out planning, because whilst that's improving, planning years ago used to take about 3 to 6 months. If you find a piece of land and you want to get through the planning process, it could take 3 to 6 months. 2 years now. 2 years. If we see a piece of land, we will not start on site for 2 years. It is extremely challenging and something we need to improve on significantly. The other challenges here are all of the kind of constraints you can imagine with a new development. But it feels like every single challenge that would come along, you could add 5 months to it. It depends on the organisations you're working with, so easement issues, the water authorities, everything sort of just adds time. And time is, in a nutshell, people waiting for new homes. which we're absolutely desperate for. We work in partnership with these organisations and do extremely well. The finished product, I want to put these photos up there because you wouldn't know the difference between the affordable house here and the shared ownership property, and that's on purpose. This is not about no frills homes, and build them as cheap as you can and as many as you can. This is about building, in my opinion, certainly quality products that people really want to live in. And then when they live there, really want to look after their homes and communities. And we believe that very deeply. And so do a number of the housing associations that we work with. It's very, very important to them. In fact, when you buy that shared ownership property, you might only purchase 10% of it. You can purchase anywhere from 10% to 75% in the initial tranche. But when you go and see it, the experience is like buying a brand new home. And why wouldn't it be? They are buying a brand new home, but largely with a different payment plan. And as I've said, if they don't buy this home, where do they end up? Very much still living in the properties that they've outgrown, perhaps, or on the waiting list, or in private rent that is just not as secure as it could be. So that Standard Hill scheme we're very, very proud of, and is making a big difference. We'll do this for 150 homes here, or 2 bungalows that we're building that's really important to a local community. And that's what makes us slightly different. This is not a commercial adventure for us. In fact, we probably lose money for the first 40 years of this development, and then recover it later. By far the most exciting new development that we're working on, and we've been working on with the Combined Authority on this, is the Nottingham War Rooms. This was an old Cold War bunker that has been out of use. In fact, has never been used, and has sort of sat there doing nothing for many, many years in a large piece of land around it that really lends itself to redevelopment and making some happy homes. So we've been working very closely with a number of partners to unlock this development, and we're really pleased to say we'll be starting on site in the next 3 weeks, I hope. The development is largely housing around the scheme, and these are the partners that we're working with. Again, you can't do this alone. You have to work very, very carefully with everybody. Total scheme cost of nearly 30 million. And again, you need to parcel this up. A large proportion of that is through a loan that we then pay off with that rent over the years, which takes about 40 years to catch up with its costs. But we've got some funding coming forward from Homes England and East Midlands Combined Authority, which we're very, very grateful for, because it unlocks what we think is going to be a fantastic development that will make a real big difference in the areas. And I think some really great homes. Again, that's just sort of flicking back. I think we've got the scale there, but these half of those are social rent and the other half are shared ownership. Going forward with Strategic Partnership 3, not in the presentation, but we've got to bid for that over the next, I think, 6 to 7 weeks, and put a bid forward to Homes England. 65–70% will be for social rent, and then the remainder for shared ownership. Of that social rent, there'll be supported housing, there'll be extra care, and some limited supported housing in the shared ownership, but some rural properties as well, because that's extremely important. Again, if it's important to the community, it's important to us. And you can see there the difference this project will unlock. This won't be EMH's project, but it was in partnership with this organisation that will completely change the way that building looks, and we'll make some great use of it, actually. But that's what partnership does. I hope that answers the questions that you were raising. Happy to talk about any challenges and issues that housing associations are going through.
Thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Woodings.
Thank you. It's good to have an update from the, a major player in the registered providers sector. And really good to hear that you are moving forward with social rent, because what we find in Nottingham is that the overwhelming demand is for social rent properties, not least because of the security of tenure. And, we don't know what damage it does yet to children's lives, where they're constantly being evicted from one private rented property to another, having extended journeys to school, disrupts their parents' employment opportunities as well. So that is good to know. But it sounds as though the grants are still specified to say that you must have some for rent and some shared ownership. I know that was always the case under Homes England before they changed their guidelines. I was going to ask about, viability, as you say, is a huge issue when you have social rent. How much, and I saw some of your pictures had solar panels on the top. And now we know that when you add solar panels, if you try to add heat pumps and things like that, this is a few years ago, but it made social rent housing less and less viable the more of those you put in, which was a great shame. But I just wondered about what the opportunities are now to make these homes as energy efficient as possible, although they look very lovely. And finally, we're really excited about the War Rooms project in Nottingham. When we say it was a bunker, it's the best preserved centre for regional government left in the country. There were 8 built. There's 3 remaining. And the idea was that if a bomb hit Westminster, that the whole of the national government would move to one of these 8 locations. 1,000 people. There's accommodation for 1,000 people in that bunker. They couldn't take their families with them. There's a full BBC television and radio studio underneath there as well. And it's a really exciting project to see not just the land being used, but actually the building itself, which is of huge interest to the people in Nottingham who are interested in local heritage and history. Massive interest. People are desperate to get in there, but we're telling them they can't because it's not safe. So really pleased that that project is being taken forward. And I know a lot of the members of Parliament have been lobbying for years to say, what can we do about this War Rooms? It's really an untapped resource. Could be a huge tourist destination, to be honest, if ever that came about as well, because it's so interesting, the history of that building. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to answer Councillor Wooding's question?
Yes, thank you. Totally agree about the War Rooms. Absolutely fascinating and a bit spooky when you think that it was sort of completely ready for people to move into, and nobody moved in. So everything's ready and preserved. I think a lot of that it will be preserved as part of the refurbishment, which obviously looks rather different. But no, thank you for that, and I agree. Thank you for the social rent points. We totally agree. We moved away from affordable rent as soon as we could. And we focused purely on social rent. Problem with social rent for us is it costs more in our loans. How do you make up the difference? Because your rent, you don't get as much rent, and therefore it's harder to cover your loans. So you need more grant for social rent, and there wasn't any. There is now, and not everybody's moved away from affordable rent, but we certainly have. We have 0 going forward. So. I fully agree. We did an assessment the other day of, who lives in our properties. What's the biggest cohort of customers we have? Children, and so that's really fascinating, isn't it? How do you have a stable home? Viability is always the challenge. That's sort of one second. I was only working in development last year, so all I fought for was just new developments. And you move over to housing and development, and for some reason I'm interested in investments in existing homes. And the third investment, you're right, is for warm homes and efficient homes. So for SP3, we're bidding for an additional top-up grant to help us build more homes with energy efficient elements to it. Not 100% of our programme will be at the top grade. There will be some, of course, that meet building regs, which is shifting up with a future home standard. But we're trying to find an avenue to push as far as we can to make more energy efficient properties so it's cheaper for our customers to live in there. Recognising the balance. It's a challenge.
All right, I've got Councillor Khan and then I'll take Councillor Walker-Gurley.
First of all, apologies, Chair, to the previous presenter. I left my laptop at home and I got these papers printed quickly and they're all jumbled up. So if I start asking Chris about retrofitting brownfield sites and public and press, you'll know why. But forewarned is forearmed, so you've taken that point. So I just want to know if you will sort of look at your strategy, bearing in mind the outcome of the LGR. Shall I respond after each question? Yeah, thank you. That strategy comes to an end this year. The revised strategy is shifting and starts again in April, but in the bidding programme, it very much includes the areas we're talking about. And the war rooms is a great example where it's really beneficial for us, the community partnerships. So yes, there'll be darker greens in the areas you mentioned.
Councillor Walker-Gurley.
Thank you. Comments and a couple of questions. I noticed that one of the screenshots we had up there that looked like the north of Notts was quite low priority or zero priority. I just wondered why that was. And then I really liked the comment you made about the mix of housing. I think that's really important as well. I'm just curious on that as far as you know, how big a priority that is as well. So like bigger family homes and bungalows and so on. And then one last thing was that the county, we have to provide children's homes and would love to discuss further with yourselves if there's anything we could do on that as well.
Thank you. Do you know when you regret putting a slide in the deck?
Yeah.
Do you know it's the colour coding problem, that's all. Just to say that this is because of our existing stock largely, and that is shifting. And the more we build in the area, the bigger priority that becomes. It is not, there is no difference in priority in terms of new build going forward. So I can give you that assurance that we'll be working in the area as much as we possibly can. And hopefully the war rooms, that's a heck of it. It's a real big investment for EMH as an example of that. So we'll be seeking more opportunities. So that should turn green before the next time I present. Thank you. You're absolutely right about the mix, in my opinion, too. That, again, this is very much about place shaping and the communities we work in. We work with the local authorities on that mix. Sometimes that's a challenge because the mix is not the most commercially beneficial developments to build, but we put that as a secondary point when we're looking at pieces of land. There's some pieces of land that we pick up as part of a partnership approach, so we come in a bit late and you don't get as much influence. We build our own, we secure our own land, and as much as possible we'll get a mix, which often is a small number of larger properties, bungalows, supported housing, block. Sometimes that can be 10, and the extra care scheme we're building is 100. You know, so it's a real mix. One bedroom properties are becoming in high demand. Again, we're hearing. So the mix is really important to us because, as I said at the beginning, if it's important to the community, then it becomes important to us. Otherwise, we'll be building things that that don't fit. So that's absolutely right, and always open-minded to. You know, it's interesting about the children as such. I mean, it's so important that we get this right, and the community involves all of those kind of things. So we do play areas as well, and in our developments, green open spaces that make a difference. And we don't do children's centres at the moment, but there's never a closed door on those kind of discussions.
Councillor Rawson.
Thank you. I should declare an interest, I guess, as a member of the planning committee before I ask this question, but I don't detect anything different that we've been doing in terms of members. We obviously make planning applications when they're put in front of us. We try not to defer, and obviously with the emphasis that national government's putting on trying to improve planning and speed things up, I just wondered if you could sort of give us a bit more information about what the hurdles are and the blockages and what we can do to help in terms of planning.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great question. I really appreciate you asking it, because I feel like things are moving in the right direction. There's a lot of push in this area. But right at the beginning, there's simply not enough resources within the planning departments. You know, some real horror stories where developers are pushing extremely hard to move things through and moving things through a pile on somebody's desk they can't get to, and then the next day that person was off sick, because the common problem, there is so much coming through and not enough resource to do it. So that's one significant element of it. But it's not always the planning departments that make an impact on this. It is the sub-parties that need to comment on it. And they're not resourced appropriately quite often. And again, it's at the back of their list, the solicitors that they appoint to do the Section 106 agreements. Sometimes you get planning in April, but you don't sign a Section 106 till July, September. It's just so the whole process has really slowed down. And when you add everything together, you know, 2 years is without a doubt the norm now. Yeah, it was fascinating. So not so much when we go to committee, but more about getting there in the first place. And the understanding about sometimes that challenge around viability. As I said, these homes, you know, we get as much grant as we can to unlock these projects. They're not viable. You know, commercially, they're not a viable product. You know, for 40 years, our cash flow is now 50 years before it needs to break even. That rent is too low. So sometimes we've got a challenge around costs that we have to pay, Section 106s and so forth, and that can become a challenge for us, because we recognise the need to pay towards new developments. At the same time, you know, we've got to find a way where that comes from. So there's a lot of talk about do we go more digital? Is there an automated approach to planning and all of those things that really sound exciting? But these things take time. I hope that gives a flavour. There's quite a lot of challenges. And sorry, just to add, some places are really quick compared to others. There's some places that unlocked it quicker, and there's a real great discussion with the planning department with us quite openly, so that when we've got some things coming through, it's expected. Where others are, you can't talk to us yet. We can't even give you time to talk to us, and so we're starting quite cold, and that makes a big difference, I think, because then you build something that works.
Thank you. I'm really pleased you asked that question, Councillor Rawson, because it is a concern to all of us that are planning authorities of the cities and the districts across the region. I'm glad you weren't saying that planning committees are blockers to development.
Oh no,
because the district council network shows that that is not the case. We've recently done some research, and if everything that our planning authority had approved was built out, we'd have more houses than we've got people in the country to actually fill them. So, but the frustrations that you mention are felt by the planning authorities as well, yeah. And particularly a shortage of planners and lawyers, and we're going to be taking on responsibility for a strategic planning role that will require MCA to recruit planners, and I wonder where those planners will come from, probably within the existing planning departments and and leave us more in more difficulty. However, East Midlands councils, alongside other councils across the country, are taking part in national recruitment drives to get young people who are leaving school to go into planning and to legal areas and other areas. In fact, it almost seems like it's all areas where we're struggling to recruit at the moment, to be honest. So we are doing something about that, and it'd be interesting to just explore. You know, there's some works quicker than others, particularly when we move on to the new authorities that are going to come about, because there are some real opportunities there for efficiencies across the board in a larger authority that's a unitary. So thanks, Martin, for asking that question, because I think it's of concern to all of us. Now, I've got Councillor Answer who's wanting to come in, so you can switch your microphone off, because he asked first and he's not spoken yet. So,
thank you very much. First of all, my apologies. Sat nav gave me that end of the council house, and so I've had to go right around the town to get to that end of the you can't just cross the road.
no.
So my apologies for being a bit late. Otherwise I would have been here, just after 10:30. On the planning issues, I can support you in what you're saying about planning is insufficient in the local authority. Planning officers I'm referring to, and the work that they have to do. The applications come in and pre-planning stuff and all that's all done. But after that, it takes a long time for that to get to the planning committee. Once the planning committee make the decision is done as quickly as it can be on that night, done. But, a lot of this arguments is down to 106. That's a big stumbling block, because it can be a lot of money if you're building a big site, a lot of money for social, a lot of money for councils, a lot of money for everything, and open space and all that. So there is a big issue with planning. I'm just hoping that once we get into a bigger situation, because every council has got their own local plan, and we're reviewing that again now, even though in 2 years' time it may not be needed in the sense of the locality. But I do think that looking at it in a bigger picture and having a bigger picture there to draw from when you're drawing up those plans, it will make things much more efficient, I would have thought. I mean, we've had planners doing our planning from Wales. We're in Mansfield. Wow. We've had planners from Wales making decisions and coming to planning committee. That's how bad it has been at times. So, it's bound to all things up. I think I like the idea within your presentation, for looking at homes for people with problems, adult social care, which I'm involved in at Nottinghamshire. We are wanting to make sure that people where possible, have their own front door and not go into a care home and things like that, as long as we can keep them at home or into an housing where we can give them plenty of support. That is important to have that sort of property available. So I'm glad you are looking at that and doing that. And obviously, old people's bungalows are important, because old people's bungalows free up houses. So it's so important where we can to have bungalows for people to move into, so people can downgrade into a bungalow and leave a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom house available. We've got quite a few people that live in a house. They've lived there all their life, and now they want to stay there, even though there's only them there. And so I think that building more bungalows and nice bungalows will help. I think that the planning application, when you say 2 years, I mean, that is a long time from an application for an outset to even go into planning. I think that is a ridiculous amount of time for any of that. What you haven't mentioned, and what I thought should be considered, is a modular build. I don't think you've not decided any modular build at all on any of your sets, all brick build. We've got to build all these houses. We all need, I don't care what district it is, they all need social housing. We all got big waiting lists, massive waiting lists for people. So I just we did an example out at Mansfield when I was the housing portfolio. We built 10 modular homes, and which are very efficient. very economical to run, and yet, you know, nobody seems to be talking about it at all now. So
Right question.
I think that's something to really take into account and to consider. But I do think that, you know, the care homes, and also we get a lot of applications at Mansfield for a house in the middle of an housing estate to accommodate one child or two children. So they've taken over a home, could be a 2-bed, a 3-bed home, to look after one child who's got problems, major problems, or two children. And we've got the applications nearly every month, but when it's coming through that we've got these applications for these houses. Now, the problem with that is they're usually in a cul-de-sac or somewhere like that, and where the roads are narrower, because they're older houses. The roads are narrower. People complain because of parking and because of possible antisocial behaviour. And you know, if we could get some situation where we could consider building homes that could be used for accommodating difficult children, because that's what they are, difficult children. But you know, there is a big problem with these situations. So, you know, I'm talking teenagers as well, I'm talking little children as well, I'm talking teenagers. I think we need to consider that. But I think that what you all talked about today within your portfolio and what you're producing, I think that is a sort of thing that should be a description for all builders. But, you know, not just social housing builders. I think all builders should have some criteria where these are one of the criteria that people meet. They just build houses up, and I know we talk about 10% being for social housing and what have you, and they even argue and come back to planning and don't want to do that. They come back and say, we can't afford it, we only want 5%. So you get situations like that. But I do think that we need to make sure that we've got the social housing, and we need to incorporate some of this. This 106 money could be used for some of these sort of problems that we've got here, not just simply just on open spaces, but it needs to be considered everything.
I think there's just a couple of things I'd like you to focus on. Was a lot of what Barry said was wider than the conversation this morning. Is obviously you offer some extra care services as I see it. So perhaps if you can say a little bit about how you make a decision when to do that. And then, are you doing any modular building? I think those are the two key things I'd like to focus on, please.
Thank you. And I'll try and bring something up in a bit, but it'll take me a couple of seconds. First of all, extra care. Totally agree. These developments are, and the one we're working on at the moment is 90 homes. You know, you walk through a really lovely, safe environment, through a sort of lunch area and an area where people are playing games, and you know, there's, you know, times I've walked through and there's a disco going on in the middle of the day. People's energy just comes back to them when they move into these properties, and people feel like a new release of life, you know, because they're live in a community, but they go to their front door into their 2-bedroom apartments with a kitchen and their own environment. So they're absolutely fantastic. Problem with extra care is expensive. And the EMH could build, and others could build more homes if we didn't do the bungalows and we didn't do the extra care. But that's just not right. And we've got to get that right. Sometimes when there's large developments, I'm thrown that, you know, the extra care is missed until later on. And then you have to really work hard to bring it back into the mix. So it's a really unviable, important product. And in the new strategic partnership, we're bidding for at least 3. And we're asking the government to recognise that problem with viability and grant. So hopefully that gives you some context, and I'll try and pick up a picture in a minute. Modular, we built 42 units in Beeston, I think it's Beeston, with Ilka Homes. That was modular, fully modular. And thank goodness it was extremely well delivered, well received. People brought some, people rented some, and then Ilka went bust. Somebody else had 200 properties with Ilka, and they built about 10, and it's a real challenge. Then another modular company went bust, then another modular company went bust, and I don't think there's hardly is really challenging at the moment. So whilst I absolutely fundamentally agree with the principle that, you know, we've got to build differently and look differently, boards are really nervous about modular homes at the moment. And the government's moved a little bit away from modular. So timber frame, yes. You know, modern methods of construction, yes. Modular, yes. But you will hear of it a lot less. And it's a real challenge. And we need as a sector, not just an EMH, it's not just an affordable housing sector, but to find a solution through it. But we've done quite a bit in comparison to others, and it was successful. £20,000 a unit more. But that's now. It will, if we can, and it will be again for a bit because there's not many about. But in the future, you can imagine that coming down to £20,000 more for that 2-bed house with modular.
Thank you. So I know that Councillor Khan's waiting to speak and Councillor Alston, and then I'm going to close this conversation down, okay, because I think everybody's had a fairly good crack at it. Councillor Khan.
Yeah, very quickly, Chair, and nothing to do with your presentation, but it's just that, you know, when you mentioned the delay in planning extra, I wonder when the authorities are all sort of, you know, settled and we know which it is and which it isn't, that perhaps you know, would give some consideration in future to coming to a financial agreement with the relevant authority in terms of having a designated planning officer. And, you know, like we've entered one with Rolls-Royce recently, but if you have 25, 30, 35 million pound developments, you know, to look at something like that.
Would you pay for a designated
Yes.
planning officer?
Yes, it'll save us a fortune. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
We'll find a solution.
Yeah, good. Councillor Alston, thank you for being patient, by the way.
My question is about infrastructure, and it might not necessarily relate directly to you, Chris. So you mentioned a figure of 65 million for delivering 500 homes. What about, how does, when it's increasing urbanisation of rural towns and villages, let's say, increasing traffic, maybe a roundabout needs upgrading, or, you know, we need an extra school and an extra doctor's surgery. Is the contingency money within that to cover those sorts of things? At my ward where I live, for example, there's 350 new homes going up. And well, the number one complaint I get from my residents is streams of traffic going. There's only one way in and one way out of the village. And there's a mini roundabout at each side, and it's just locked up at busy times. This extra 350 houses ain't going to help that situation. Is that under consideration?
Well, I fundamentally agree. You know, if you're building 10 properties here, or we do rural 5, what you can't draw out of that small development is a doctor's surgery. But the truth is, and I understand entirely that a really good community includes the doctor's surgery and everything from extra care to the bungalows. So some opportunities are easier to do that than others, and we get involved in those kind of things and build those surgeries out sometimes, and then rent it to the doctor's surgery as opposed to own it. And we expect that 106 to go, the costs to go towards that. But I understand the challenges. You know, sometimes the development is built, but the wider infrastructure, which goes beyond the development, is not. I understand the tensions. I haven't got a perfect answer, unfortunately, but we certainly work in partnership when we do play shaping to try and unlock all that.
My one. The planning was allowed to go through, providing they spent £250,000 upgrading the mini roundabout. But instead they reduced the plan. They built 200 houses instead of 350 to get around that. And a separate company came in and built the other 150. So we've still got 350 houses, but we don't have a new roundabout.
I understand. The tension between commercial and but yes, I can see how those can slip through. Hopefully that wasn't us.
Well, thank you, Chris, very much for coming along and presenting to us and also listening to our questions and concerns and having a good stab at those. We've clearly got a lot in common. And I think that's the thing that gives us the opportunity to do, to solve those issues together. Because we're very keen not just to build houses in the Emka area, we want to build places and communities. And with the partnerships that we're able to come together as a regional organisation, I think I'd like to think that you know, we'll see a difference. Probably not immediately, but for the next generation. So thanks very much for your time this morning. Thanks everybody for your questions and comments. You're quite welcome to stay, Chris, but if you need to get somewhere else.
Yeah, I've got to build some homes. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is an update on the Brownfield Housing Fund, which, as we all know, needs to be all contracted by the end of March. You've got the paper before you, which I think it was Councillor Walker-Gurley who was asking about locations of allocation of funding, and that the report before us sort of covers that quite well. I think it also covers how it explains when things drop out, and all that. But that's just an overview. I'm going to hand you over to Barry now, who, as you all know, is the interim land and housing programme manager, to do the update. Obviously, I'll take all questions, but I'm going to leave it to Barry to decide whether he wishes to answer those questions while we're in open session, or he reserves some of them so when we go into closed session. Because the one thing that happens when you start listing individual schemes is you get a lot of questions that could be commercially sensitive. So we'll divide them up as they go along. So over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I'll certainly take the report as read. It gives an update of where we are, and I'm happy to sort of put some flesh on the bones, really, in terms of my presence here. But we are very much at the business end now of the delivery cycle for this fund. As Councillor Gilby have said, we need to contract everything under the current rules of government by March 26. You'll be aware that Mayor Clare did write to government and ask for an extension on that fund and some flexibility. That flexibility has not been positively received to date. I remain hopeful because I'm glass half full rather than half empty, but we will need to proceed as though the basis of our activity. To date, we've got something like 25 contracts still to sign and seal between now and the end of March. So we're absolutely in the peak of that daily activity as officers in the delivery of the scheme. Members will recall there's two allocations here. The first one was 16.8, which was the first fund. And then in November, we were confirmed an additional £19.7 million of funding, which we try to deploy as best we can. We remain largely on track to deliver both. Certainly, the level of confidence I have on the first fund is probably higher than the second for reasons that I'll explain in a moment. But as we sit here today, my expectation is that we will be certainly on or close to those figures for the first fund. I think there are, and there may be, some further challenges around the second fund, which I'll identify individually. And perhaps if we could do that in private session, that might be helpful given the nature of the applicants. Typically where we are now is that most of these schemes have a full business case approval, but not all of them do. There are about 4, I think, currently that are still going through what I'd call the nuts and bolts of the due diligence phases. And that's resulted really either because there were late applications or that the deals are manifestly very complex and can't be done rapidly. So the sorts of things that we're going to have to deal with the applicants before and as part of their preparation for the full business case then gets passed for external validation through our consultants, and they need time to look at it as well. So the fact that they're slightly late shouldn't worry you and Julie, but because they are complex, there are things that are that have several moving parts to them. So typically the things we're wrestling to the ground at the moment are all schemes need to have a certificate of title that MCA is happy with in terms of the land that is being developed. Chris has talked quite a lot today about the difficulties of sites and acquiring sites and some of the work that goes to them. The title and the registration of the title is really important to us, and those title entries need to be up to date. It can take up to 4 weeks or 6 weeks in some cases to get searches back. We're not the only people at the moment that are putting land searches in of local authorities and the land registry. So needless to say, we are playing a massive sweeper game with that particular aspect. Once we've got the title, there are often adverse entries on those title that need to be disposed of, and that's a technical term which basically says that the developer can't develop the site usually until he's done X, Y, or Z. And so that's an important part of getting some of those rights registration details moved. A lot of the sites require what we call easements, or the ability to do something to run a service across another piece of land or to acquire rights to access a particular piece of land. These aren't things that are generally picked up in the planning consents, but do affect the legal title. So again, we're uncovering a number of those, which in a number of cases are unknown to the applicant. So this becomes a bit of a discovery process for everybody involved. We're looking at absolute evidence of funding ability. So where applicants have said that they can fund the development, we're looking to see the bank statement or the evidence of funding or the funding agreement from third-party providers. We're looking at setting up first charges on some schemes to protect ENCA money. Other forms of guarantee we've mentioned previously, but important to mention here because a couple of these loans are reasonably large ones and they'll be secured by parent company guarantees. So we need the form of the parent company guarantee to be acceptable to the authority. And we also need the security to be on the right tier of organisations so that we're not charging it to a tier that, were it to go insolvent, creates problems for us. All of the above means that it's a moving feast and it changes on a daily basis. And hopefully Ed would be testify to the updates that I give him that it really is a moving feast. Which is why I say we have some confidence in terms of the number that we have in front of you as being absolutely realistic. There are still a number of sites for which there are planning issues that are as yet unresolved. In 2 cases at least, we're expecting a planning consent to be forthcoming on the 18th of March. And all being well, and assuming it's approved at that committee, then that will proceed forward. But on 2 sites, particularly, and I'll name them in the private session if that's okay, it looks as though the planning authority is unable to determine them as intended in the March period, so they will slip into April. And as it stands at the moment, that remaining the case, they will slip out of the funding envelope support unless we're able to secure some flexibility from government. There's a further scheme that the applicant believe the consent was extant, which means they believe they've implemented the scheme. The local authority currently has a different view that the scheme's implemented, and therefore we are in the process of to and froing to try and resolve that. So in planning terms, not quite there, but nearly, but I think there are probably 3 schemes that I would say would be at risk that may fall out of the funding. One of those is from the first fund and 2 of them are from, 3 of them are from the second fund. That said, as I said, we're confident on the 16.8 being delivered with the number of homes that are stated. The ones that are affected on phase 2, we've still got some business cases that one in particular is a significant number which would affect that delivery number either upwards or downwards. I think we're currently looking at about 16.3 million for 600 homes. But if 3 of those schemes are unable to be processed or we're unable to resolve the outcomes, then they will clearly fall away. And that would leave the fund at a reduced figure. The aggregate of those total sites would be around 2 million, with 78 homes that would be not supported. So the second fund, I think, assuming we're able to deliver everything that we could, worst case scenario would be about 14.5 million and about 523 homes. So I think that's probably about all I want to say, but happy to take any questions privately if there's any content in that people would like to raise, Chair.
Right. So any questions that you don't think are commercially sensitive, please? Oh, wow. Councillor, are you waving? Bye-bye. So no questions then? Oh, okay. Therefore, that concludes the public part of this agenda, other than the recommendation that the committee is invited to note the update on the presented report. We're happy to do that. Okay. We'll now move on to item 9, which is I'm not going to read all this out, but basically it's the reasons why I'm moving that we move into confidential session, and hopefully Councillor Radford will second that. And all of you are in favour of that, aren't you? So that's carried. So we're now in confidential session. So the record